We're going to see who the real Kevin McCarthy is.
He can reach the peak of his power.
He just cares about accelerating his career.
This is somebody who eats, breathes, and sleeps politics.
One of the smartest people that I ever knew.
Well, it's a tough job.
The Speaker of the House is from Bakersfield.
Kevin McCarthy, we'll start off with you.
Well, I'm Kevin McCarthy. I'm running for the state assembly.
Well, I've known Kevin for more than 50 years. His dad was an assistant fire chief and was very well respected.
Kevin and I went to high school together, and we've known each other a long time in that regard. Whenever you hear of people talking about the class clown, that's Kevin.
And that's where he met Judy. He met her in biology class, his future wife. So they have been together for all those years, you know, since high school.
we laughed and said, Judy, how are you with Kevin? You know, Judy she still is. She's so calm, she's so patient, she's all of those things. And Kevin, again, at the time, he was the one always clowning. So they do say that opposites attract.
He played football, but he wasn't the star of the football team, but he played football.
He was okay. He was a tight end. He played defensive end. I know oftentimes Coach Briggs would yell at him because there were times that he would be clowning around and may not be as serious as others. He was more business oriented. Like, how can I do this? How can I make this work?
Anybody have any idea from all those studies? You know what got me involved in politics? The California lottery. And the most money you could win there was $5,000. I scratch off 3 of them, and all 3 say $5,000.
He purchased this deli, and then he sold it and took the money and went to CSUB and received his BA and his master's. He came as an intern into our office. At that time, Congressman Bill Thomas's office.
I did read his extensive application. He had his clippings from his deli and his winning of the lottery and those sort of things. And he looked like he's a pretty interesting character, but I thought, hey, I better get to know you first. So,
our family was Democrats before that. And when he interviewed with Bill and he didn't get the position, he just volunteered.
And of course, he was here a month in the Bakersfield office before I had to hire an intern to work for him because he was constantly on the phone, constantly doing lots of things.
He's joining us now live from Los Angeles where I would imagine an even bigger party is going on, Kevin.
Yeah, well, it's a wild party down here. Any minute, Arnold Schwarzenegger, our new governor, is about to walk into the room.
He worked for Bill. He had the best trainer. You know, the best, I thought, one of the best politicians in Bill Thomas who ever came from Kern County and from this area.
Kevin was always sort of the antidote or the reciprocal or the opposite of Bill Thomas, who was this, very stern, professorial, grouchy even at times figure. And Kevin was the guy you could turn to and kind of get some relief. You actually get a smile out of Kevin.
I talked with Assembly GOP leader Kevin McCarthy about that today.
If you look at redistricting, the Democrats drew 50 safe seats for Democrats.
I was the district director at the time for Congressman Dooley, and Kevin McCarthy was the district director for Bill Thomas. Bill Thomas, chair of House Ways and Means, built things, worked on policy. I mean, you couldn't debate this congressman because he was so brilliant. Kevin was the political person. The political person who was different than what the Valley had seen, what we had all seen.
I first met Kevin McCarthy when he was working for then Congressman Bill Thomas, but he was really becoming known with his work through at that point, through the California Young Republican Organization.
He was the head of the mainstream faction, and he had to kind of knock back this conservative wing that was trying to get their people in and some of their ideas into the Young Republican Organization.
One of the real challenges that the Young Republicans had faced prior to Kevin's ascension is it had been a very divided organization between different ideological factions. And Kevin, through sheer force of will and political and personal skills, was able to forge an alliance to turn it into a much more effective organization than it had been previously.
I think they're looking forward to having the decision by the courts.
He becomes such a fundamental part, not only of Thomas's congressional organization, but of national Young Republicans at that point. It was pretty clear that if and when the opportunity presented himself, there would be tremendous pressure on Kevin to run for office.
Was in 1965 at a community college in Bakersfield.
And so when that assembly seat opened up, I wouldn't call it quite a foregone conclusion, but probably not anything that different.
I do not believe in failure. I believe in competition. I like the idea that other people are running against me. I like the idea of competition.
Kevin went in, got elected in the primary because the seat was overwhelming Republican. And of course, the battle with Maggard was there were two Republicans running for the same seat. So yes, that was a tough race. That might have been his toughest race, really.
At the time that McCarthy went to Sacramento as a freshman member of the Assembly, Republicans were still in the minority, and they still had no real chance of becoming a majority, at least no realistic chance. But they were a relevant player, one, because they had a larger minority caucus, and second, because McCarthy looked very aggressively and almost unceasingly for ways to imprint Republican concepts and Republican principles into bipartisan legislation when the opportunity presented itself. And while McCarthy back in those days was identified more with the moderate wing or the more traditional conservative wing of the party than the more aggressive conservatives, he very quickly was able to build relationships across the ideological spectrum, not just within the Republican Party, but with Democratic leaders as well.
You could work with them, you could laugh with them, you can, he would support, more bipartisan efforts.
You need an individual that can work with the local, state, and federal representatives. At the same time,
First thing he does after he wins in June is start working to help elect other Republicans around the state. And he did that, either raising money from here, sharing talent and ideas of what they could do.
There were rumors that, he had a whiteboard and was kind of, really figuring out who's who. He wanted to do the politics. He wanted to raise the money, he wanted to create the bench, and he wanted to, be able to become the leader.
And when you're moving up and you become sort of a star in the Republican Party, there's a blending of power, raising money, raising more money, more power. So it was a relationship that Kevin figured out very early.
For him to have become the leader of the Republicans in the assembly, in the state assembly, was, right off the bat, you knew, like, are the Republicans in the state assembly that short-handed that they got to grab a guy who just showed up, 2 years ago?
He raised the money he needed and then was able to help raise for other folks who didn't really like fundraising. Kevin loved it. I would see him at fundraisers and he could work a room.
Well, you're talking to someone who will never call a race and who's spent 2 weeks waiting for her results. So it's too early.
So when Congressman Thomas announced his retirement, no, it was Dooley first. Congressman Dooley announced, Kevin went up to me and he said, Nicole, you need to run for Congress. Congressional seats don't come up. And I said, Kevin, I just got here. And he goes, you're gonna make the biggest mistake and you're gonna regret this. If a congressional seat opens, you run. He saw that line to national office. And he was he literally was heartbroken in a sense that I would choose to stay and represent and do what I was elected to do. And that's why we're so different. That's why I'm still here and he's gonna be the next speaker, right?
I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of my work with Congressman Bill Thomas. I have a record I could stand on, bringing 1,000 new jobs with the trade zone, bringing air service to Ridgecrest, and fighting each and every day for constituents. Whether it be with the IRS, whether it be with Social Security, that means I'm always there to listen. Look, I have a long history in the Republican Party, a proud history within the Republican Party. I want to serve you. I would be very honored to have your vote on March 5th. Thank you.
Kevin McCarthy.
Our new congressman?
Yes, looks like he is going on to a big victory tonight.
Well, remember, we had taken over the House. The House was Republican. The year Kevin gets elected, boom, we lost the House.
I think it's a needed time for Republicans and then the President and the Senate to
self-evaluate a little bit.
Evaluate and come up with where we go next.
I'm joined now by the new Congressman. Congratulations to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
In your speech earlier tonight, you told the crowd that you'll be bringing Kern County values to Washington, D.C. Talk to me a little bit about that.
That's really just bringing common sense and greater accountability to Washington. So when they bring up the legislation, we
unifying Kern County, we know common sense, we know quality of life, and we know accountability.
You will also possibly be serving with minorities, so how do you feel about that?
Well, I serve in the minority now in Sacramento, and we've still been very effective. But the difference may be much closer. So I think you might find people being more bipartisan and actually have a bigger say than we do now in Sacramento.
Thank you so much for your time this evening, sir, and congratulations once again.
So I was Chief of Staff for Chief Deputy Whip Eric Cantor when Congressman McCarthy was elected to Congress in 2006. And we, as senior staff for Whip Cantor at the time, we were tasked with identifying sort of the up-and-coming members, the members who had influence within the conference, who were well respected by their peers. And it didn't take a great deal of time to realize that Kevin McCarthy stood out among his peers.
I started covering McCarthy in 2009 when he was in charge of the Republican Agenda Project when they were trying to take back the majority in 2010. He was a young whippersnapper of a congressman.
A local newspaper named Congressman McCarthy the 110th Congress Rookie of the Year. By 2009, he was named Chief Deputy Whip. And Congressman McCarthy is slated to become the next Majority Whip in the 112th Congress.
The new agenda embodies Americans' rejection of the notion that we can simply tax, borrow, and spend our way to prosperity.
I think people recognized early on that Kevin McCarthy is a special kind of member, someone who works hard, someone who brings people together really well, and we needed to give him something, a platform for him to be able to exercise that leadership. So it's not often that someone as junior as he was given so much responsibility, but it was because the leadership at the time recognized that this is someone who was going places, and they wanted to devote those energies to something positive.
When Eric was the Chief Deputy Whip and was running for whip in 2008, one of the first things you have to do when you become whip is select a Chief Deputy Whip. Your number two, the person that's really going to be your day in, day out partner in trying to get things done in the House.
You know, our country is on a path to fiscal ruin.
And I developed, with input from some of the key members of our staff, a list of about 9 or 10 members from across the conference that I thought were realistically good candidates for a Chief Deputy Whip. But Eric would never look at it until he was actually elected. He was sort of suspicious in that way. And when it came time for him to pick his Chief Deputy Whip, I sat down with him and I said, well, I've got this list I want you to take a look at. And he said, do we really need to do this? I said, yeah, and he looked at the list. He laughed at some of the names that I put on there. And he goes, handed back literally 10 seconds later, said, it's Kevin. It's been sort of fun to watch all the speculation in Washington over the last few weeks about this young trio of Democratic leaders who are just taking power. But there's really nothing new here, because a generation ago, those three young guns were Kevin McCarthy and Eric Cantor and Paul Ryan.
There is a better way, and a new team is ready to bring America back.
This kind of was born in 2008 and 2009 after Obama was elected. They wanted to kind of be the new face of the Republican Party.
We have to reduce our deficit.
Well, this is the era of the Tea Party movement. There was a lot of energy in the Republican Party, a lot of backlash to the Obama administration.
I think people should be engaged in their government.
They were just looking to bring new energy to the Republican Party, new ideas, and it was just an effort to paint a new face, a new younger face, more dynamic face of the Republican Party that at the time I think people had viewed as old and stodgy.
They're relying on a lot of billions of dollars from the federal government.
It took fire quite quickly, and certainly made a lot more news for the Republican side, particularly if we're in the minority. It was something good to have, was it both the book and the three of them traveling together.
And in the beginning of this book, during the roundtable discussion, you do mention the idea of kind of machines, political machines, continuing to put candidates into the flow of both the Democratic and Republican side. But some might suggest here in Bakersfield that you're part of that same machinery, the Abernathy machinery that's so discussed here in local political circles. Talk about that if you could.
I don't see how that's a machinery. I got it started. My family were all Democrats. I started my small business at 19, and I applied for an internship when Congressman Thomas didn't even know who I was, and he turned me down.
Keep in mind, this is, there was a lot of frustration around the country at the time. People felt that frustration. They were struggling after the financial crisis to make ends meet, and they really wanted to do something. And Kevin identified really talented people around the country and inspired them to run for Congress based on this collective idea that Kevin, Paul, and Ryan were working on.
Well, a lot of the people that came in 2010 were products of McCarthy's recruiting. McCarthy recruited a lot of candidates in those days and still does, and is very hands-on when it comes to how those folks run their campaign, how they present themselves.
That's what we need to start talking about, and the president has offered nothing. And so we're going to let the ideas transfer onto the floor and have the best idea win and be able to move that forward to the Senate.
He was well-liked. He was hardworking. He was fun to be around, and I think he had just his energy was and his enthusiasm was contagious, and I could tell that he was somebody that had a really bright future in the House.
And that is not how we play with taxpayers' money. It's right to have this hearing, but it's right to scrutinize, and before we move forward on anything, the legislative analysts and the peer review had the same questions to the business plan.
You can have a whip in two different ways. One who really brings down the hammer on people and tries to pound them into voting a certain way. Or you can try to bring people together by motivating them, by encouraging them, by inspiring them, and that's much more Kevin McCarthy's approach. He doesn't make enemies, he makes friends.
And this shows each and every year what makes this community so great.
He is somebody that people want to have a beer with. He doesn't drink, but he's somebody that people want to have a beer with. He's friends with everybody. He's jovial. He's somebody who has good relationships kind of across the ideological spectrum.
Doing out recruiting candidates and laying out the challenges America faces, but laying out solutions. Young Guns is all about ideas and solving problems.
He's one of the most personable, well-liked people, and from a very early part of his career, was very inclusive and made a habit of making friends with members, new members, hometowns, names of their family, wife, kids. He just established relationships as well as anyone I've ever seen.
I still remember where I was when I heard that Eric had lost his primary. It was such a shock. I think we had a 33-point lead the day before, according to our pollster.
This is a seismic political upset. It's going to have huge repercussions in Washington, both politically and on the policy front.
People were shocked, and they hadn't contemplated, the next Congress without Eric Cantor, most likely as the Speaker of the House. So it resulted in two things. But just like when I presented that list to Eric of, potential candidates to be his chief deputy whip, when the conference was in need after Eric's defeat, there was no question that they would turn to Kevin. He had grown in the job. He had matured as a legislature. He was still grounded back home, and he was ready to step up.
That's my job. If I do my job well, I have no concerns.
The big question this morning, who will replace House Speaker John Boehner? Boehner announced on Friday he is stepping down at the end of next month, and his decision will no doubt have a huge impact on how things get done in the nation's capital.
Yeah, that was a time where you had a number of our members who were out for blood, and they were able to push out John Boehner, and I don't think that they were ready to accept someone who was just next in line.
Good afternoon, I'm Kate Snow, live from MSNBC headquarters in New York City. We are starting off with breaking news out of Capitol Hill this hour, where House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy has just officially announced his run for House Speaker.
And possibly new leadership under Kern County's own Kevin McCarthy.
I think everybody saw this coming, and Kevin McCarthy really jumped at the opportunity presented to him by that surprise resignation announcement from Speaker Boehner.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping.
Why? Because she's untrustable. Now, he's getting criticized severely for suggesting U.S. government money organized this Benghazi hearing for the purpose of going after Hillary Clinton politically.
That's an absolute inappropriate statement.
Well, I might have said it differently.
You might encounter resistance from the so-called Freedom Caucus, the 40-some conservatives in the House who are saying, wait a minute, not so fast.
You are in the process of trying to get enough votes to be Speaker of the House.
Yes.
You don't have 218 yet, do you?
Oh, we're very close, yes.
I want to transform the way we do business.
Are you playing kind of a spoiler role here at all today for Kevin McCarthy?
Why are you running if you think you're going to lose? The question is Kevin McCarthy going to be the Speaker or is he going to be the majority leader?
Good evening. There is turmoil for Republican lawmakers right now that could affect all of us before it is over. It has to do with who will become the next second in line to the president.
And I think there's something to be said for us to unite. We probably need a fresh face. I'll stay on as majority leader. But the one thing I found in talking to everybody, if we are going to unite and be strong, we need a new face to help do that.
In a shocking move, Kevin McCarthy stunning Washington, dropping out of the race. Speculation surging on the reason for his sudden exit.
Kevin McCarthy is out. You know that, right? And they're giving me a lot of credit for that.
Trump didn't have any idea. I mean, to be frank with you, Trump had no idea what Kevin McCarthy was like and what his qualifications were for the job. It was an amalgamation of things, and quite frankly, a dislike of McCarthy from a small pocket of conservatives in the conference.
They were looking for a much bigger shakeup, and it wasn't really about Kevin McCarthy. It was about toppling the leadership.
I mean, this is somebody who has a long history in the GOP, but the reaction was it was really interesting because McCarthy, to this day, I would say, still wonders whether he should have dropped out of that race.
I don't want making voting for Speaker a tough one. I don't want to go to the floor and win with 220 votes. I think the best thing for our party right now is that you have 247 votes on the floor. If we are going to be strong, we got to be 100% united.
Kevin McCarthy, one of the first people he called when he decided that he wasn't going to go forward was to Paul Ryan to tell him that he needed to take the job. Ultimately, it fell to Paul Ryan because you just needed somebody else, and he was the best choice from outside of the current leadership structure.
It was tumultuous. Paul Ryan, who was then the Ways and Means chairman, the chairman of the powerful tax writing committee, didn't want to become speaker and was kind of forced into it because McCarthy couldn't wrap up the deal or thought he couldn't wrap up the deal. It was very bruising for McCarthy and something that he thought about for a long time. He did kind of settle into a groove being House Majority Leader.
Well, he was an incredibly important part of our leadership team after that moment. Paul Ryan was entirely new to leadership when he became Speaker, and we leaned on Kevin McCarthy quite a lot. But I do think what happened to him motivated him. I think he does want to demonstrate to people that he can be the top dog, that he can be the leader, that he's not anybody's sidekick.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States. And we are going to make our country great again.
McCarthy was one of the only people in the leadership that stuck by Trump through thick and thin, through the campaign in 2016 and then afterwards. So McCarthy has been very loyal to Trump, and Trump has been loyal in return for now.
Well, I think from the very beginning, he understood the movement that Donald Trump was leading and how powerful that was.
The President of the United States.
Trump knew nothing about Capitol Hill, didn't know the first thing about legislating or legislative politics or anything like that. So McCarthy was that translator for him in a lot of ways. And I think, listen, they're both similar in the sense that they're both social people, Trump and McCarthy. They both like to talk. I mean, McCarthy's known to call people at all hours of the day and night to, talk about politics. Trump does the same.
I think that once Trump got to Washington, he saw the difference in Kevin compared to most other House members in terms of how aggressive he is on activities there.
There was this kind of interesting dynamic because Paul Ryan didn't get along with Trump and McCarthy did. So really McCarthy became kind of Trump's big ally in the Republican leadership. And Ryan likewise relied on McCarthy to manage Trump. So it was a symbiotic relationship in that respect.
Yeah, I think Kevin McCarthy's approach better reflected the conference that he was serving. And I think he understood that creating conflict with the leader of the party, Donald Trump at the time, was only going to be disruptive to getting our work done.
Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry.
It is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
Acquitted for life.
He's constantly trying to keep Trump happy. He's trying to sort of keep Trump, placated. He doesn't want to sort of poke that nest.
And he understood that if you were to cross him, it could be really dangerous for Republicans. And so he worked really closely with him, I think, from the very beginning to make sure that they were always on the same page. That was an important role that someone needed to play, and it was him. And I think they had a strong relationship the entire time that I was in leadership.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong.
Before January 6th, they had a pretty good relationship. They worked together on a lot of House races, and of course, Republicans unexpectedly won seats in the 2020 election cycle, even though President Trump lost the White House. And so that really proved, I think, to President Trump that McCarthy does have a very strong talent and knack for that electoral politics aspect. And then, of course, January 6th happened.
Let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Protesters have now broken into the U.S. Capitol.
The person who was shot earlier at the Capitol has lost her life.
This is an unprecedented security breach.
People have to be locked down. Members have to be locked down. This is the people's house. This is a house that people come in and watch us debate.
He was panicked about the attack on the Capitol, was desperate to get the people out of the Capitol once they were in. Was making phone calls all around, including talking to the then President Trump.
And the president's response to Kevin, to me, was chilling. He said, well, Kevin, I guess they're just more upset about the election theft than you are.
Violence, destruction, and chaos we saw earlier was unacceptable, undemocratic, and un-American. It was the saddest day I've ever had as serving as a member of this institution.
Which tells you so much about McCarthy's mindset after the 6th and how panicked he is about the damage that Trump is doing and could do to the party.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. A vote to impeach would further divide this nation.
This is a special edition of 17 News, Capitol Chaos.
The way I look at it,
I had no idea the depth of his irritation, if you can use that word, until right before I sat him down for that special.
Kevin McCarthy voted not to impeach President Trump, and David Valadao voted to impeach him. Hypocrites and heroes.
At that point, I realized, he's seriously concerned not just about Kevin McCarthy, but about the country, and willing to lay it all out there.
That picture tells you everything you need to know. Kevin McCarthy thinks kissing the ring and making this, without a doubt, the party of Trump going forward for the next 2 years is his path to the speakership.
In the weeks after January 6th, it became clear that a lot of Republican voters and a good number of House GOP lawmakers, Kevin McCarthy's flock, did not feel that strongly about what Trump had done on January 6th, and were happy to keep embracing him.
McCarthy was the first person to go down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump, and a lot of people credit McCarthy in some respects of kind of rescuing Trump's, not his career, but to give him some legitimacy after the Capitol was attacked.
Leader McCarthy going down and being able to talk to him really legitimized Trump, I think, and kept him in that leader of the party type of stature.
That's a really important moment on Trump's rehab tour in the weeks and months after he left office.
I was invited to go to Mar-a-Lago to see the president by the president. I was already in Palm Beach, so I stopped by to see him. He asked to take a photo.
What Trump didn't know at the time when McCarthy went down there to patch things up was that Kevin McCarthy, was privately plotting to get Trump to resign.
Liz, you on the phone? Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin.
Troubling tapes for the man looking to become Speaker of the House that have led to questions about the political future of Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy.
So we obtained a series of audio recordings for our book that capture what Kevin McCarthy and his top lieutenants were saying in the days after January 6th. And they were desperate to basically get rid of their Trump problem.
I guess first a question, when we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution.
Leaked audio reveals he was prepared to tell former President Trump to resign following the riot at the U.S. Capitol.
I mean, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign. I mean, that would be my take, but I don't think he would take it.
McCarthy, on one of those calls, tells his fellow House of GOP leaders, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call Trump and tell him he should resign because he's going to be impeached and he should get out. That's an extraordinary pledge to make, given McCarthy's obsequiousness in the 4 years of Trump's presidency. He placated Trump at every turn. But in those moments, he saw Trump as a political problem that he had to fix.
We are now getting more stunning new audio obtained by the New York Times.
I've had it with this guy. What he did is unacceptable. Nobody can defend that, and nobody should defend it.
New fallout over the newly released audio recordings from after the January 6th riot. In them, House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy is heard worrying that some Republicans' rhetoric could lead to more violence.
I just got something sent now about Newsmax, something Matt Gaetz said, where he's calling people's names out, saying an anti-Trump in this type of atmosphere. And some of the other places, this is serious stuff people are doing that has to stop.
We start tonight with the developing political news out of Washington hitting close to home. Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy will not comply with the January 6th committee's request for an interview and records.
McCarthy's decision to not respond to that subpoena or sit in front of the panel is really just a further, almost expected move in response to trying to delegitimize the committee as a whole.
Well, just to be clear, I'm going to focus on the issues people care most about. And when we do that, we also have an accountability to hold this administration accountable.
But his opponents say he kind of lacks conviction and lacks core values, and that's why they oppose him. Now, he has become much more populist. He has become much more in the mold of Trump.
And so there has always been this tension between McCarthy and the Freedom Caucus, but unlike his predecessor, John Boehner, McCarthy has taken a different tactic with them and tried to embrace or at least give a seat at the table.
Sitting Republican House members appearing at a white nationalist gathering.
Marjorie Greene is going to have committees, yes. She's duly elected.
He's not ideological. He's not anchored in any wing of the party on philosophy. He wants to rise in the ranks, and he wants to keep folks happy.
This is a party that is very fractured, but if anybody can bring people together and unify the conference right now, I think it's him.
More than 2 million Americans have already cast their ballots in the midterm elections, and a new poll shows some good signs for the GOP.
Republicans would and should be feeling pretty good about their chances.
This is an absolute disaster for the Republican Party.
Definitely not a Republican wave, that's for darn sure.
This was expected to be an event to really celebrate McCarthy as a potential speaker and the House gains, but that is not the case.
Would he be able to get everyone in his caucus, from firebrand Matt Gaetz to moderate Don Bacon, to vote for him? We will see. Brace yourself for some chaos over the next couple of months.
It's deja vu all over again right now, because the same kind of problems that McCarthy had then, he's having now.
He didn't get a governing majority. He got scarcely a majority at all. And this is creating enormous headaches for him.
To believe that Kevin McCarthy is going to be Speaker, you have to believe he's going to get votes in the next 6 weeks that he couldn't get in the last 6 years.
I mean, this is nothing more than kind of high school drama. I mean, that's what this is. I mean, Congress is like high school, and McCarthy's the popular kid at high school who some of the other kids don't like. And I think that's what's driving, and that's what's difficult for McCarthy, because there's no real issue, nothing he could do to make people like him more. McCarthy's been in Congress for more than a decade. This is kind of his last chapter.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
I mean, that week I would call it Kevin McCarthy's crucible because you were really put through the meat grinder. And you looked worn out at the end of that marathon.
But it wasn't just that week. Remember, we had the election in November, and I knew then it was going to be a problem.
Topping our newscast here at 5, what could be the most important day in Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy's over 2 decades-long political career is now just 1 day away.
It has been a rocky ride that could end in triumph or defeat.
Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, doesn't have the votes to become House Speaker.
Let's start with some simple math here. It's not good math for Kevin McCarthy.
I mean, I think the Republican Party right now is in the greatest danger of meltdown that it's been since 1964.
Definitely a no on the first ballot. We'll see what happens.
Kevin McCarthy's part of the problem. He's not part of the solution.
If you want to drain the swamp, you cannot put the biggest alligator in charge of the exercise.
We will not vote for anyone else but McCarthy. These people think they're stubborn. We're more stubborn.
I have the record for the longest speech ever on the floor. I don't have a problem getting a record for the most votes for Speaker, too.
Thank you. The next order of business is the election of the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
I rise today to nominate the gentleman from California, Kevin McCarthy, as Speaker of the House.
Good day. We're coming on the air with breaking news. Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy appears to have failed to come up with the votes he needed to become the next Speaker of the House.
A Speaker has not been elected.
And they want somebody else, anybody else.
We are now in territory we haven't been in 100 years.
I rise to nominate the most talented, hardest working member of the Republican Conference. I'm nominating Jim Jordan.
A Speaker has not been elected.
When asked point blank in front of everyone of Scott Perry, Kevin McCarthy asked, "What do you want?" And he would not answer. And he dodged and finally got to the point where every Republican in the room was screaming, "What do you want? Tell us what you want." And they won't give us a direct answer. No reason to be here other than to divide Congress.
The chamber remains in a state of limbo until a speaker is chosen. Members can't even be sworn in until that happens. Is 3 times a charm? Will the third vote work?
A Speaker has not been elected.
Look, today, is it the day I wanted to have? No. I mean, there was a lot of things we wanted to do.
Stay tuned, buckle up, because what happened yesterday we haven't seen in 100 years.
My colleagues, well, it's Groundhog Day. Again.
They want a new face, new vision, new leadership, and I believe that face, vision, and new leadership is Byron Donalds.
Even having my favorite president call us and tell us we need to knock this off, I think it actually needs to be reversed. The president needs to tell Kevin McCarthy that, sir, you do not have the votes and it's time to withdraw.
No member-elect having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast, a Speaker has not been elected. A Speaker has not been elected. A Speaker has not been elected.
Morning, everyone. This is day 3 of the Republicans not being able to organize themselves in a manner that allows the Congress to move forward.
Does it look like I'm ready to make a deal?
A Speaker has not been elected. A Speaker has not been elected. A Speaker has not been elected. Speaker has not been elected.
We need to get to a point where we start evaluating what life after Kevin McCarthy looks like.
What happened was a number of members, and there were some who thought maybe I'd drop out. There's some who thought, well, maybe somebody would rise up. But what really happened in the conference, as you saw time after again, nobody else could win the race.
The question is, does he, in trying to find the votes, compromise so much that he effectively renders his speakership worthless? Is it going to be even worth the hassle if at any moment this small faction could effectively render you irrelevant?
We have a couple members who are out, but I think Washington
outside the room, gentlemen,
have been voting against.
What was the way you flipped?
Perry. McCarthy. Roy.
It took 12 ballots, but now there is a break in the Republican resistance. Kevin McCarthy promised progress. We are finally seeing it. 14 rebel holdouts moving from never to eventually Kevin.
I think you saw we made some very good progress. We'll come back tonight, and I believe at that time we'll have the votes to finish this once and for all.
Gates.
Present.
Matt Gaetz, he needed him to vote yes, not present.
He's trying to convince him.
He appears to be trying to convince Matt Gaetz to vote yes and not present.
Matt Gaetz pointing right now, trying to make some sort of point to Kevin McCarthy. Yikes. I mean,
Wow.
this looks like a bit of a heated conversation. Yeah.
This is an incredible moment.
We haven't seen him doing this personally on the floor. He's obviously been doing it behind closed doors, but until this moment, we have seen his deputies do this. This is it. I mean, this is do or die for him.
This is quite a sight to behold.
And votes.
Kevin McCarthy needs one vote to become Speaker of the House.
He does not look
Matt Gaetz does not look like he is willing to acquiesce.
Texting every number in my phone of people who might know what's going on here.
Look at that face.
He looks dejected.
Look at somebody's holding somebody back. Look at that. Oh, somebody just held somebody back. Stephanie, just look at that. It looks like a fight breaking out on the floor.
The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 216. No member-elect having received a majority of the votes cast. A speaker has not been elected.
I move the House do now adjourn until noon Monday.
I'm not sure what's happening right now. Matt Gaetz is there. It looks like he's... Can you tell what's happening right now with the green and the red?
I mean, look at this image that we're seeing play out here. You have Kevin McCarthy and Matt Gaetz. This was a nail biter. They are now talking face to face at this point. Here we go.
Could he be changing his vote?
He's voting no.
It looks like McCarthy's telling everyone to vote no with that red card to adjourn, which means maybe he and Matt Gaetz just came to some sort of agreement. Maybe that altercation you saw was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Therefore, the Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives.
One of the problems that you're going to have is you're going to have a situation where Kevin McCarthy, in order to become Speaker, probably had to give a lot of concessions to the very people that he now has to wrangle into a majority coalition.
But as Buck Owens sings, how many of you that sit and judge me have ever walked the streets of Bakersfield? Me winning Speaker and having to go not on the first time, but the 15th, I think being from Bakersfield, learning that it comes a little harder, but you stay with it, and in the end, it'll turn out all right, I think that helped me a great deal.
What comes from Bakersfield? Twangy music, smog, and Kevin McCarthy.
He was the deputy whip. He was the whip. He was the minority leader. He was the majority leader. He's the minority leader again. He has literally covered all of the bases. He's very good at fundraising. He's very good at recruiting. And he's very good, depending upon if you like him, you call him agile. If you don't like him, you call him a chameleon.
Overall, there is just this feeling that he just cares about accelerating his career. And he doesn't really care about our constituents.
I want my grandparents to live here. I want my children to live here. I want to improve the quality of life for all in Kern County. Thank you.
He has Bakersfield running through his blood, and we can trust that he will have us, foremost in mind. Now, whether or not that's been the case, with our, astronomical murder rate and deep-seated poverty, you can make that argument. But as far as the people who are casting the ballots, at least 68% of them, that says we trust that this guy has our interests at heart because he is one of us.
Now, nobody is defeating Kevin McCarthy in Kern County, and as a result of that, they can put a lot of their focus and attention on their leadership role. And as a result of that, they're playing hardball politics at the national level. They're free to do that.
actually find a way to make a common sense solution that politicians cannot control this system regardless of which way you call it.
He has a fundraising network that rivals presidential candidates. I mean, he's somebody who Republican donors really like hearing from and giving money to. Most importantly, he single-handedly kind of keeps the House Republican political infrastructure funded and flush with cash.
Many years ago, he brought Condoleezza Rice here for a fundraiser to raise a war chest that he probably didn't need. Well, where did that money end up? It probably ended up with a lot of people who were in competitive races, who needed that money, who owe their seat to Kevin McCarthy.
He loves this stuff. This is somebody who eats, breathes, and sleeps politics. He loves the art and the science of politics. He likes to solve problems, and he has devoted his entire career to this, and he has gotten really good at it, candidly.
He's not a movement conservative. He doesn't have firmly held beliefs that drive him on an everyday basis. It's a strength and a weakness.
But I do not believe in wasting government. I was one of 3 that was able to uncover something that CPAs, auditors, state and federal, that could not.
There is a lot spoken and written about whether and how McCarthy has changed over the years. I think that conversation misses the point, because most political leaders, while their beliefs are grounded on more timeless principles, are going to adapt and adjust and update when circumstances demand it. Otherwise, the voters are going to leave them behind.
And I want to thank you, the viewers, for spending this next hour with us.
No matter how you feel about his politics or his approach to things or his ambition, it's still kind of cool to think, wow, you know, this guy has risen up to this position of prominence from little old Bakersfield.
He wants that mantle so bad that he's supporting people who are so divisive, and I'll say ugly and racist and sexist. I mean, what can you say when he can stand next to Trump? What does that say to all of us who knew him and could have a conversation with us, play basketball with them, and worked on policy with them? It makes me very sad. He's one of the smartest political people I know, but has lost his way. But there's still hope.
I think he's thinking about everything he's ever done and what worked and what didn't work and how he's going to make decisions in the future could be totally different. But he's challenged, and now his test is ultimate.
Right now, he's facing perhaps the greatest challenge he ever has.
And look, it was hard enough for John Boehner. It was hard enough for Paul Ryan. And the caucus he has now is even Trumpier. It's even less willing to compromise. And he's got a small group of people who despise him personally and don't trust him. And those folks would have been largely irrelevant with a bigger majority. But the fact is, they only have 222 seats, and that empowers a noisy, very conservative, but suddenly very important group of hardliners who are threatening to make McCarthy's life hell.
You might encounter resistance from the so-called Freedom Caucus.
But some might suggest here in Bakersfield that you're part of that same machinery, the Abernathy machinery.
And possibly new leadership under Kern County's own Kevin McCarthy.
Kevin McCarthy, we'll start off with you.
Well, I'm Kevin McCarthy. I'm running for the state assembly.
We want to thank you all very much for coming in tonight. I know you want to get to your respective parties to watch the results come in. Thanks so much for being part of our broadcast tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Good luck to you all.